Welcome to St. Croix Church. This is the 10th session on the book of James, the letter of James. And today we're going to look at chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. Chapter 5 is the last chapter, so we probably only have 2 sessions left. So I'll read the passage, verses 1 to 12, in the NRSV. It begins with kind of fiery judgment on people that are called the rich. Come now, you rich people, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You've laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in pleasure. You've fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You've condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. Suddenly there's a tone change, and it's now as though James is beginning to speak to a different group of people. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Beloved, do not grumble against one another, so that you may not be judged. See, the judge is standing at the doors. As an example of suffering and patience, beloved, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Indeed, we call blessed those who showed endurance. You've heard of the endurance of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Above all, my beloved, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. Okay, well, here are my thoughts. This final chapter seems to be formed around the notion that there are 2 kinds of systems at work. There are those who are living for wealth in an illegitimate way, holding back the rightful wages of those who depend on them for work, storing up treasures as though they were masters of their own destiny and arrogantly speaking as though they were in control. I don't believe that this passage, the fiery judgment part at the beginning, is a rebuke or a chastisement for people that have more money than others. I don't think it's that at all. It's and then there are lots of examples of wealthy people in the scriptures that are considered righteous. Instead, it's about a certain posture towards wealth that's entirely opposite to the priorities of the new community. The word for rich ones or rich people is interesting. In Greek, it's hoi plusioi. And this word seems to come from the idea of fullness or from the idea of many. People aren't sure what the origin is, but it's the word that's used for wealth or for riches, and it comes from either the many or from the word for full or abundance. And it's not always a negative word. Sometimes in the New Testament it's used in a very positive way. For instance, in Ephesians, God is said to be plusioi or riches. He's full of riches of mercy. Christ is said to have been rich but became poor for our sake. That's in 2 Corinthians. So, and some of the believers in the New Testament are called rich in faith. So it can be a very positive concept, but here it's a negative concept. And as I say, it's not just about those that have more material goods. It's about this posture, which is the exact opposite of what the new community is trying to be. One of the things that occurs to me about the new community that James is writing to is it's really very Jewish in its desires and its aims. The message of this part of the chapter seems really similar to Psalm 73, which is worth looking up if you don't know it. It's a beautiful psalm. It's about someone who feels extremely vexed at the quality of life that the wicked rich seem to have. They seem as though everything is easy for them and nothing ever goes wrong, and they're comfortable and strong. And the writer, thinking about them, almost loses his faith. But he enters the temple and he has an experience. He remembers the goodness of God, And he also remembers that ultimately there'll be justice one day when we all stand before God. So that's what kind of brings him back to a position of intention to keep living in a way that he thinks God will like. Thinking of the new community this way makes me think that Jesus was really in line with his Jewish culture. He's just showing what their best dreams would be like. They'd be able to build the new community where everyone is welcome, even people that aren't Jewish. And he was showing them the implications of their own teachings by imagining a community that accepted everyone without judging some as better than others. And those in the opposite system of life than the wicked rich are experiencing hardship. This is the second part of the passage, the one that's meant to encourage people to be more patient or to persevere or endure. A good deal of this letter has been about God's help in the midst of trials. And now as we near the end, there's a cry to hang on, persevere, show the endurance of people like Job, who looked like complete underdogs, but they were the ones who were vindicated in the end. One of the reasons for hope is a phrase that's called the coming of the Lord. And it's a little bit hard to know exactly what it means. I can think of three possible interpretations. The first one is what people normally read when they read this, that Jesus is about to return, probably within the lifespan of the first church, that he's going to come back in a physical way. There are reasons for believing that that's a great interpretation from this passage, but from others as well. Another interpretation is that God in his righteous power is going to show up in some way by defeating the enemies of the new community and by bringing comfort to those who love him. And a third way to look at it is that it may be a euphemism for death, a pleasant way, just an expression, an idiom for speaking about death. In this case, the coming of the Lord is a way to speak about graduating from this difficult life into the presence of God, who will reward those who tried to live for mercy and righteousness. If this is the correct interpretation, it reminds me a little bit about a phenomenon that we knew when I was young. We had something called pet rocks. Just for maybe 1 or 2 years, they became a big thing at Christmas time, and people would give them as gifts. And there was a joke about how you would train your pet rock. You'd leave it sitting in one corner of the room, and then you would walk 12 paces back, and then you would say, "Pet rock, come." And of course, it wouldn't move. So then you would take one step closer. "Pet rock, come." And this would go on. And so the idea of maybe that the coming of the Lord is actually the inevitable flow towards death. I'm not sure what the best interpretation is. Maybe the one in the middle is the one that I would like the best myself. That God in his righteous power is going to show up in some way, and the circumstances will change, and the people that have been oppressing others will lose their power, and there'll be comfort for the new community. The final verse 12, is interesting. I'll read it. "Above all, my beloved, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." It's almost as though this is a summary verse or a key somehow. It may be the key to seeing which side you're on. Are you among the humble followers of God, trying to build the new community with honesty and integrity and humility? Or are you still caught in the ways of a very different system, where the main goal is self-reliance through wealth ill-gained and ill-used? The author longs for the readers to be safely striving to be part of the new community, evidenced by their integrity. Let your yes be yes, your no be no. In other words, do what you say you will do. But also by their humility. Don't swear as though you were in control of what is happening. So I think this is another great passage. It's almost as though it's contrasting two ways of being in the world, and one is living for yourself in a way that harms others, and another is joining into God's desire to build a community that really shows everyone that they belong. That's all for this week.